I'm sorry, but perhaps you'd be more comfortable at David's Bridal down the street." The words hit me like a slap across the face, and I watched my sister's excitement crumble in real time. We'd been planning this day for months, and now some pretentious sales associate was suggesting we didn't belong in her precious boutique because of how we looked. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I should have seen it coming the moment we walked through those pristine glass doors of Enchanted Elegance Bridal. The way the receptionist's smile faltered when she took in our appearance. The subtle once-over that lingered just a beat too long on my worn jeans and my sister's casual sundress. We weren't the typical clientele, that much was obvious. But Maya had been dreaming about this place for 2 years, ever since she got engaged to her college sweetheart, and I wasn't about to let some snobby boutique staff crush her dreams on my watch. My name is Rebecca Foster, and I'd been looking forward to this sister bonding day more than Maya knew. Between my demanding schedule and her wedding planning chaos, we barely got to spend quality time together anymore. When she asked me to come dress shopping with her, I immediately cleared my calendar. This was important. This was her moment, and I wanted to be there for every second of it. Maya had always been the dreamer in our family, the one who believed in fairy tales and happy endings, even when life gave us every reason to be cynical. Growing up, she used to spend hours cutting pictures out of bridal magazines, creating elaborate scrapbooks of her perfect wedding. She knew exactly what she wanted. Something classic, but with a modern twist, elegant, but not over the top, sophisticated, but still romantic. Enchanted Elegance was supposed to be the place where dreams like hers came true. The boutique looked like something out of a movie set. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over racks of gorgeous gowns, each one more stunning than the last. Silk and satin seemed to float on invisible hangers, while delicate beadwork caught the light like captured starlight. The whole place smelled like expensive perfume and possibility. It was exactly the kind of magical atmosphere Maya had been hoping for. But from the moment we stepped inside, I could feel the judgment radiating from the staff like heat off summer pavement. The receptionist, a perfectly polished woman in her 30s with the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes, had greeted us with professional courtesy that felt more like tolerance. She introduced herself as Madison and explained that walk-ins were typically discouraged, but they might be able to squeeze us in if we were serious about purchasing. The way she said serious about purchasing made it clear she had her doubts. Maya, bless her heart, was too excited to notice the subtle condescension. She bubbled over with enthusiasm, explaining her vision for her dress, describing her wedding theme, sharing details about her fiancé and their love story. Madison nodded politely, but I could see her mentally calculating whether we were worth her time. When Maya mentioned her budget, Madison's eyebrows rose slightly. It wasn't a small amount by any means, certainly enough for a beautiful dress at most places, but in a boutique where some gowns cost more than luxury cars, it apparently placed us in the bargain hunting category. "Well," Madison said with that same practiced smile, "let's see what we can find in your price range. I should mention that most of our designer pieces start significantly higher than what you've indicated, but we do have some lovely options that might work." The dismissal was subtle but unmistakable. We were being categorized as budget shoppers before we'd even looked at a single dress. Maya's appointment was scheduled with a consultant named Victoria, who appeared 20 minutes later looking like she'd stepped off the pages of a fashion magazine. Perfectly blown-out hair, immaculate makeup, and an outfit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She greeted Maya with professional enthusiasm, but I caught the way her eyes swept over us both, taking inventory of our clothing, our shoes, our general presentation. Victoria led us to a spacious fitting area with ornate mirrors and plush seating. The whole setup was designed to make brides feel special, pampered like princesses preparing for their big day. Maya was practically glowing with excitement as Victoria explained the process, but I noticed how the consultant's tone was different from what I had observed with other customers. Less reverent, more rushed, like she was going through the motions rather than creating a magical experience. "So," Victoria said, consulting her tablet, "Madison mentioned you have a specific budget in mind. That's smart, really helps narrow down the options. Let me show you what we have in that range." She led us to a section of the boutique that, while still beautiful, was clearly the budget-friendly area. The dresses were lovely, but they lacked the intricate beadwork, the luxurious fabrics, the designer labels that made the other gowns so special. Maya tried to hide her disappointment, but I knew her well enough to see it in the slight slump of her shoulders, the way her smile became a little more forced. "These are all beautiful," Maya said, diplomatically, running her fingers along a simple satin gown. "But I was wondering if I could maybe try on one or two from the designer collection? Just to see. I know they're more expensive, but maybe we could work something out, or maybe I could stretch my budget a little." Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course we can look at a few options, but I want to manage expectations here. Our designer pieces are really investment gowns, and the price points reflect that. I'd hate for you to fall in love with something that's not realistic for your situation." The condescension in her voice was becoming harder to ignore. She was speaking to Maya like she was a child who needed to learn about financial responsibility, not a grown woman making an important purchase for the most significant day of her life. But Maya persisted because that's who she is. She's determined and optimistic and refuses to give up on her dreams easily. "I understand they're more expensive, but this is my wedding dress. It's something I'll remember forever, and I want to at least see what's available. Maybe there's something that could work." Victoria sighed, a sound so subtle I almost missed it, but it was there. The sound of someone being asked to do more work than they thought necessary for customers they'd already written off. "All right," she said, "let me see what I can do." She disappeared for several minutes, leaving Maya and I alone in the fitting area. Maya immediately gravitated toward one of the designer gowns on display, a stunning creation with delicate lace sleeves and intricate beadwork that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. "Isn't it gorgeous?" Maya whispered, almost afraid to touch it. "Can you imagine walking down the aisle in something like this?" I could see the longing in her eyes, the way she was envisioning herself in that dress, picturing her perfect day. This was what she had been dreaming about for years, and she deserved to at least try it on. She deserved to feel beautiful and special and celebrated, not like she was asking for charity.
They were fine, adequate, perfectly nice dresses that would photograph well and make her look lovely on her wedding day. But they weren't the dress, the one that would make her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. After the fourth or fifth try, Maya was starting to look defeated. The excitement that had carried her through the morning was fading, replaced by the resignation of someone learning that her dreams might be bigger than her reality. "What about this one?" I asked, pointing to a gorgeous gown with intricate embroidery that had caught my eye. It was clearly in the designer section, but maybe if we ask nicely. Victoria followed my gaze and shook her head before I even finished the question. "That's definitely not in the budget range we discussed. That piece is actually reserved for one of our VIP clients anyway." "Could we at least see the price?" Maya asked quietly. "Maybe look at it up close?" Victoria's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Listen," she said, her professional mask slipping slightly. "I appreciate that this is an important day for you, but I think we need to be realistic here. These designer gowns are serious investments, and they're really intended for clients who can afford them without stretching. I don't want to waste anyone's time or create unrealistic expectations." The words hung in the air like a slap. Maya's face flushed red, and I felt my own anger starting to build. Who was this woman to decide what my sister could or couldn't afford? Who was she to determine what constituted a realistic expectation? "We understand they're expensive," I said, keeping my voice level with effort. "But my sister just wants to try on a few dresses. Isn't that what you do here? Help brides find their perfect dress?" Victoria's smile became even more strained. "Of course, but we also have to be practical. I've been doing this for 5 years, and I can usually tell when someone's budget and desires are aligned. I'm just trying to save everyone disappointment." Maya was quiet, staring at her hands in her lap. I could see tears threatening at the corners of her eyes, and my protective instincts kicked into overdrive. This was supposed to be one of the most exciting days of her life, and instead she was being made to feel small and inadequate by someone who decided our worth based on our appearance and assumed financial status. "Maybe we should go," Maya said softly. "This obviously isn't the right place for us." But before I could respond, Victoria's supervisor approached our area. I'd noticed her earlier, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit, moving through the boutique with the authority of someone who owned the place. She'd been watching our interaction from across the room, and now she was walking directly toward us with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Is everything all right over here?" she asked, her voice pleasant but with an undertone that suggested she was very much in charge. "I'm Christine Martinez, the boutique manager. I wanted to make sure you ladies were having a wonderful experience." Victoria straightened immediately. "Oh yes, everything's fine. We were just discussing options within the client's budget range." Christine's eyes swept over our little group, taking in Maya's dejected posture, my obvious frustration, and Victoria's defensive stance. Something in her expression shifted, became more attentive. "And what exactly has been discussed?" Christine asked. Victoria launched into an explanation about budget constraints and realistic expectations, her words flowing smoothly, but with an underlying current of justification. She was used to having her judgment supported by management, confident that her assessment of our situation would be validated. But as Victoria talked, I noticed Christine's attention focusing more and more on me. Her eyes lingered on my posture, the way I held myself, something about my bearing that seemed to intrigue her. I was used to that reaction from certain people, though I couldn't always predict who would pick up on it. "What did you say your name was?" Christine asked me directly. "Rebecca Foster," I replied, wondering where this was heading. Christine's eyes widened slightly, and I saw recognition dawn across her features. Whatever she was thinking, it was making her reconsider everything about our interaction. "Foster," she repeated slowly. "Rebecca Foster." The way she said my name made Victoria look back and forth between us, clearly sensing a shift in the dynamic, but not understanding what was happening. "Yes," I confirmed, meeting Christine's gaze steadily. Christine was quiet for a long moment, studying my face with increasing intensity. Then, almost under her breath, I heard her whisper something that made my blood run cold. "Admiral Foster." The words were barely audible, but they changed everything. Victoria's confusion deepened, Maya looked up in surprise, and I felt my carefully maintained civilian facade beginning to crack. Christine straightened to attention so subtly that most people would have missed it, but I caught it immediately. The slight adjustment of her shoulders, the way her spine aligned, the unconscious respect that years of military training had ingrained in her muscle memory. "Ma'am, I believe we need to start this conversation over." I felt the familiar weight of recognition settling around me, like an old uniform I'd tried to leave behind. Christine's eyes held that unmistakable look of someone who knew exactly who they were dealing with, and I could see her mind racing through the implications of what had just unfolded in her boutique. Maya looked between Christine and me with growing confusion. "Admiral?" she whispered.
What's she talking about, Becca? I'd spent the last 3 years trying to blend into civilian life, trying to be just Rebecca, just Maya's big sister, just another customer in a wedding dress shop. But some things follow you no matter how far you run from them, and apparently my reputation was one of those things. Christine's demeanor had completely transformed. Gone was the polite boutique manager making social conversation. In her place stood someone who understood military protocol, someone who recognized what the title Admiral actually meant in the Navy, someone who knew that the woman standing in her store had commanded aircraft carriers and made decisions that affected thousands of lives. "Victoria," Christine said quietly, never taking her eyes off me, "could you please excuse us for a moment? I need to speak with these ladies privately." Victoria looked like she'd been caught in some cosmic joke she didn't understand. "But we were in the middle of the appointment. I still need to help them find something in their price range." "Victoria," Christine's voice carried the kind of authority that made people stop talking and pay attention. "Please step away. Now." The younger woman finally registered that something significant was happening, something beyond her understanding or control. She gathered her tablet and moved toward the front of the store, glancing back repeatedly with a mixture of curiosity and growing concern. Once we were alone, Christine turned to face me fully. The change in her posture was subtle but unmistakable. She wasn't quite standing at attention, but there was a respect in her bearing that hadn't been there moments before. "Admiral Foster," she said formally, "I owe you and your sister a sincere apology for how you've been treated in my establishment today." Maya's mouth fell open. She stared at me like I'd suddenly sprouted wings or started speaking a foreign language. "Admiral? Becca, what is she talking about? You never told me you were an admiral." I sighed, feeling the weight of a conversation I'd been hoping to avoid indefinitely. "It's complicated, Maya. It's not something I talk about much anymore." Christine was watching this family revelation with the careful attention of someone who understood that she'd stumbled into something bigger than a simple case of poor customer service. "Ma'am, if I may ask, how long since you retired?" 3 years, I answered. "I've been trying to stay under the radar since then." "Understandable," nodded Christine. "But I have to say, your reputation preceded you. I served as a lieutenant in the Navy for 8 years before I got into retail. I heard stories about Admiral Foster throughout my entire service. The way you handled the situation in the Persian Gulf, your leadership during the humanitarian crisis in the Philippines, the innovations you brought to carrier operations." Maya was looking back and forth between us like she was watching a tennis match conducted in a language she didn't understand. "I don't understand any of this. Becca, you told me you worked in logistics. You said you had a boring desk job that you didn't like talking about." I reached for my sister's hand, seeing the hurt and confusion in her eyes. "I did work in logistics, Maya. Naval logistics. And it wasn't boring, it was classified. There's a lot I couldn't tell you, a lot I still can't tell you." Christine cleared her throat gently. "If I may, Admiral, your sister deserves to know she's shopping with one of the most decorated naval officers of the last decade, someone who's received the Navy Cross, the Defense Superior Service Medal, and commanded the USS Enterprise during some of the most challenging operations our Navy has faced in recent years." The silence that followed was deafening. Maya stared at me with wide eyes, processing this complete reframe of everything she thought she knew about her big sister's life. I'd always been private about my work, always deflected her questions with vague answers about paperwork and meetings and boring military bureaucracy. She'd never pushed for details because she thought there weren't any interesting details to push for. "You commanded an aircraft carrier?" Maya's voice was barely a whisper. "I did. For 4 years. Before that, I worked my way up through various commands over 22 years of active service." 22 years? She was still processing. "But you're only 41. That means you started when you were 19, right after high school graduation. You were 7 years old when I left for the Naval Academy." Maya sank into one of the plush chairs in the fitting area, overwhelmed by this revelation. She'd always known I'd been in the military, but she'd assumed it was something minor, temporary, a brief detour before I found my real career. The idea that I'd spent more than 2 decades in service, that I'd reached the highest levels of naval command, that I was apparently well known enough for strangers to recognize my name, was completely beyond her experience. Christine was watching this family moment with the discretion of someone who understood the complexities of military families. "Ma'am, if I may ask, how long since you retired?" 3 years, I answered. "I've been trying to stay under the radar since then." "Understandable," nodded Christine. "But I have to say, your reputation preceded you. I served as a lieutenant in the Navy for 8 years before I got into retail. I heard stories about Admiral Foster throughout my entire service. The way you handled the situation in the Persian Gulf, your leadership during the humanitarian crisis in the Philippines, the innovations you brought to carrier operations, something I didn't want to be thinking about while my sister was trying on wedding dresses. Maya, I said gently, this is a lot to process. I never meant for you to find out this way. I was trying to keep my old life separate from our family time. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes, but they weren't tears of hurt or anger. They were tears of something I couldn't quite identify. Pride, maybe. Amazement.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A little bit of grief for all the conversations we'd never had. "All these years," she said softly, "I thought you were just my big sister who worked in some boring government office. I had no idea you were out there saving lives and commanding ships and being a hero." "I wasn't a hero," I said quickly. "I was just doing my job." Christine made a small sound that might have been disagreement. "With respect, Admiral, that's not how the people you served with remember it. That's not how the Navy remembers it." Maya was shaking her head slowly. "This explains so much. The way you carry yourself, the way you handle crisis situations. The reason you never seemed impressed by anyone's authority or intimidated by anyone's attitude. You've been in command of thousands of people." "It doesn't matter," I said. "Right now, I'm just your sister who wants to help you find the perfect wedding dress." But Christine was already moving, her mind clearly working through the implications of what had transpired. "Ladies, I'm going to personally handle your appointment from here, and I think we need to start completely over, with access to our entire collection." She disappeared momentarily and returned with an armful of the most beautiful gowns I'd seen in the boutique. These weren't the compromised choices Victoria had brought us earlier. These were clearly the premium pieces, the ones that had been deemed out of our league just minutes before. "These are from our exclusive designer collection," Christine explained as she hung them carefully in the fitting area. "Each one is a unique piece, created by some of the most talented designers in the industry." Maya stared at the dresses with wonder. They were breathtaking. Intricate beadwork caught the light like captured starlight. Silk and lace flowed like water. Each gown was a work of art, the kind of dress she'd been dreaming about but hadn't dared to hope she could actually wear. "But the prices," Maya started to protest. Christine held up a hand. "Let's worry about that later. Right now, let's focus on finding you the perfect dress for your perfect day." As Maya began examining the gowns more closely, Christine pulled me aside. "Admiral, I need you to know that what happened here today is not representative of how we normally operate. Victoria's behavior was completely inappropriate, and it will be addressed." I nodded, but my attention was on Maya, who was running her fingers along a gorgeous gown with delicate cap sleeves and a flowing skirt that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. "She loves that one," I observed. Christine smiled. "It's one of our most popular pieces, created by Elena Vasquez, one of the premier bridal designers in the country. It would be stunning on your sister." Maya looked up from the dress with longing in her eyes. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, but I'm sure it's way beyond what I can afford." Christine's expression became thoughtful. "You know, we have a special program for military families. It's not something we advertise widely, but given your sister's service record, I think we can work something out." I felt a familiar discomfort rising. I'd worked hard to avoid using my military service for personal gain, to keep my civilian life separate from my naval career. "That's not necessary," I said. "If Maya loves the dress, we'll figure out a way to make it work." But Christine was already shaking her head. "Admiral, with respect, this isn't about charity or special treatment. This is about recognizing service and sacrifice. Your sister is family to someone who gave 22 years of her life to defending this country. That means something." Maya was shaking her head again, still processing the magnitude of what she'd learned about my past. "Becca, you don't have to do anything special. I just want you to be honest with me about who you really are." The emotion in her voice hit me harder than I had expected. I'd spent 3 years trying to be normal, trying to fit into civilian life, trying to be just Maya's sister without the weight of command or the burden of military expectations. But maybe in trying so hard to be normal, I'd been dishonest about who I actually was. "I'm still just your sister," I said softly. "The uniform doesn't change that. But it does explain why you're the strongest person I know, why you always seem so capable and confident, why you never let anyone push you around or make you feel small." Before I could respond, Victoria reappeared at the edge of our fitting area. She'd clearly been told to return, probably by Christine, but her demeanor was noticeably different. The casual dismissiveness was gone, replaced with uncertainty and what looked like genuine nervousness. "Mrs. Martinez asked me to check if you need anything else." Victoria? My sister's name is Victoria. Mrs. Martinez asked me to announce that part next time. "Victoria, I think this would be a good learning opportunity for you. Admiral Foster, would you mind if Victoria stayed while we continue the appointment? I think it would be beneficial for her to understand how we should be treating all of our customers." I could see that Victoria was beginning to understand that she'd made a significant mistake, though she didn't clearly grasp the full scope of it yet. "That's fine with me," I said, "as long as Maya is comfortable." Maya nodded, her attention already returning to the gorgeous dresses Christine had brought. "I'd love to try on a few of these, if that's okay." Christine smiled warmly. "Of course. Let's start with the Elena Vasquez piece, since you seem drawn to it." As Maya disappeared into the changing area with the dress, Christine turned to Victoria.
I want you to understand something very important. The woman sitting in that chair is Admiral Rebecca Foster, retired. She commanded the USS Enterprise and has received some of the highest honors our Navy awards. She's also spent the morning watching you treat her sister with condescension and disrespect based solely on your assumptions about their financial situation. Victoria's face went pale. Even if she didn't fully understand the significance of naval ranks or the prestige of commanding an aircraft carrier, she was clearly beginning to grasp that she'd seriously misjudged our situation. "I didn't know," Victoria stammered. "She never said anything about being in the military." "That's exactly the point," Christine replied firmly. "You shouldn't need to know someone's background or credentials to treat them with basic respect and professionalism. Every person who walks through our doors deserves to be heard, to be taken seriously, and to be given access to our full range of services regardless of how they're dressed or what assumptions you make about their budget." Victoria's face went pale. Even if she didn't fully understand the significance of naval ranks or the prestige of commanding an aircraft carrier, she was clearly beginning to grasp that she'd seriously misjudged our situation. "I didn't know," Victoria stammered. "She never said anything about being in the military." "That's exactly the point," Christine replied firmly. "You shouldn't need to know someone's background or credentials to treat them with basic respect and professionalism. Every person who walks through our doors deserves to be heard, to be taken seriously, and to be given access to our full range of services regardless of how they're dressed or what assumptions you make about their budget." Victoria nodded miserably, clearly understanding that she was in serious trouble. Christine continued, "Military service members and their families often live modestly, not because they can't afford nice things, but because they choose to prioritize service over material display. The woman you dismissed as a budget shopper has probably forgotten more about leadership and responsibility than most people will ever learn." The changing room door opened, and Maya emerged wearing the Elena Vasquez gown. The transformation was breathtaking. The dress fit her perfectly, the delicate beadwork catching the light as she moved, the flowing skirt creating an elegant silhouette that made her look like she'd stepped out of a fairy tale. "Oh my God," Maya whispered, staring at herself in the three-way mirror. "I can't believe this is me." She looked radiant, glowing with happiness and confidence in a way I hadn't seen all day. This was the moment she'd been dreaming of, the moment when she'd find the dress that made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "You look absolutely stunning," Christine said warmly. "That dress was made for you." Maya turned to look at me, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "What do you think, Becca?" I stood up and walked over to her, adjusting a small detail on the dresses train. "I think David is gonna forget how to breathe when he sees you walking down that aisle." She laughed, spinning slightly to watch the skirt flow around her.
I feel like a princess. I feel like the most beautiful bride in the world. You are, I said simply. Victoria had been watching this transformation in silence, and I could see the realization dawning on her face. This was what she'd almost denied Maya. This moment of pure joy, this feeling of absolute perfection, this magical experience that every bride deserves to have. The dress is perfect for you, Victoria said quietly, and for the first time all day, her voice sounded genuinely warm. Christine was beaming as she watched Maya admire herself in the mirror. I think we found your dress. Now, let's talk about making this work within your comfort zone financially. Maya's expression shifted slightly, the practical concerns creeping back in. How much is it? I should probably know before I fall completely in love with it. Christine named a price that was significantly higher than Maya's original budget, but before my sister could respond, she continued. However, we have our military family program, which provides a substantial discount for service members and their immediate family. With that adjustment, the price would be well within your stated range. I started to object again, uncomfortable with accepting special treatment, but Maya grabbed my hand. Becca, please, let me have this. Let me be proud of my sister and what she's accomplished. Let me accept this gift that your service has earned. The emotion in her voice stopped my protest before it started. I realized that by constantly deflecting recognition of my military service, by insisting on being treated like everyone else, I might have been denying Maya the opportunity to be proud of her family, to benefit from the sacrifices I'd made over the years. If you're sure, I said softly. I'm sure, Maya said firmly. I'm sure about the dress, and I'm sure about being proud of my sister, the Admiral. Christine clapped her hands together. Wonderful! Victoria, please start the paperwork for this purchase, and make sure you note in our system that the foster family should always receive our highest level of service. As Victoria hurried away to begin the process, clearly grateful for the chance to redeem herself, Christine turned back to us. Admiral, I hope you know that what happened earlier today was completely unacceptable. We pride ourselves on treating every customer with respect and dignity, and we failed to live up to that standard today. I appreciated her acknowledgement, but my focus was on Maya, who was still admiring herself in the mirror, lost in the magic of finding her perfect dress. What matters is that Maya got her moment. That's all I care about. Christine nodded. Would you mind if I shared your story with our staff? Obviously, with your permission and without any details you'd prefer to keep private. But I think it would be valuable for our team to understand that you never know who you're serving or what someone's story might be. I considered this for a moment. Part of me still wanted to maintain my privacy, to keep my military life separate from my civilian experiences. But maybe there was value in letting people know that service members and veterans come in all forms, that you can't judge someone's worth or capabilities based on their appearance or assumed financial status. You can share what you think would be helpful. If it prevents someone else from being treated the way Maya was treated today, then it's worth it. Maya turned from the mirror to face us both. I still can't believe my sister is a famous admiral. Not famous, just someone who did her job for a long time. Christine smiled. Admiral, I suspect your definition of just doing your job is quite different from most people's understanding of that phrase. As we finalized the details of Maya's dress purchase, I reflected on how dramatically the day had changed. We'd started with Maya being made to feel unworthy and unwelcome, and we are ending with her glowing in her perfect dress, treated with the respect and care every bride deserves to have. But more than that, I realized that my attempts to hide from my past hadn't just been about avoiding attention or special treatment. I'd been trying to protect Maya from the complexity of who I really was, from the weight of a life spent in service to something larger than myself. In doing so, I denied her the opportunity to truly know her sister, to understand the experiences that had shaped me, to be proud of what I'd accomplished. Maya caught my eye in the mirror as she took a last look at herself in the dress.
Thank you, she said softly. Not just for today, but for everything you've done that I never knew about, for all the ways you've served and protected people like me. I felt tears threatening at the corners of my eyes. You don't need to thank me for that, Maya. That was my choice, my honor. Maybe, she said, but it's still something to be proud of. And I'm proud to be your sister. As Christine and Victoria worked on the final details of the purchase, I watched Maya continue to admire herself in her dress, radiating happiness and confidence. This was how the day should have gone from the beginning. This was the experience every bride deserved, regardless of their background or perceived financial status. The transformation in Victoria's behavior had been dramatic and complete. She was now treating Maya with genuine warmth and attention, asking about wedding details, offering suggestions for accessories, behaving like the professional she should have been from the start. "I'm truly sorry about earlier," Victoria said to Maya as she carefully helped her out of the dress. "You deserve so much better than how I treated you." Maya, gracious as always, smiled warmly. "It's okay. We all make mistakes. What matters is that everything worked out perfectly in the end." As we prepared to leave the boutique, Christine walked us to the door personally. "Admiral, it's been an honor to meet you. And Maya, you're going to be the most beautiful bride. I hope your wedding day is everything you've dreamed of." Maya practically floated to the car, still glowing from the experience of finding her perfect dress and learning about her sister's distinguished service. As we drove away from Enchanted Elegance, she turned to me with a smile that lit up her entire face. "This turned out to be the most amazing day," she said. "Not just because I found the perfect dress, but because I finally got to meet my sister, the real one." The weeks following our experience at Enchanted Elegance brought changes I never could have anticipated. Word of what had happened somehow spread through the veteran community in our city, not through any effort of my own, but through the quiet networks that exist among people who understand military service and the challenges of transitioning to civilian life. I first realized the story was making rounds when my neighbor, an Army veteran named Carlos, who I'd barely spoken to beyond polite greetings, approached me while I was checking my mail. He stood a little straighter when he saw me, his demeanor shifting to something more formal and respectful. "Admiral Foster," he said, and I could hear the genuine respect in his voice. "I heard about what happened at that bridal shop. Just wanted you to know that not all of us civilians are clueless about what your service means." I was touched by his acknowledgement, but also slightly uncomfortable with the attention. "Thank you, Carlos, but really, it wasn't about me. It was about my sister being treated poorly, and that could happen to anyone." He nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe so, but the way you handled it, the way you kept your composure and dignity while that kid learned a hard lesson about respect, that's something special. That's leadership." Similar encounters began happening regularly. Veterans would nod to me with recognition when I was out running errands. Civilians who had heard the story would thank me for my service in grocery store lines or at the coffee shop. It was attention I'd been successfully avoiding for 3 years, and while I appreciated the respect, it reminded me why I'd chosen to keep a low profile in the first place. Maya, on the other hand, was experiencing her own transformation. Learning about my military background had given her a new understanding not just of who I was, but of the complexity of the world around her. She started asking questions about military life, about the challenges veterans face, about the transition from service to civilian careers. "I can't stop thinking about how many people like you are out there. People who've done incredible things, made real sacrifices, and now they're just trying to blend in and live normal lives. How many times have I walked past someone without having any idea what they've been through or what they've done for their country?" Her newfound awareness was both warm-hearting and sobering. Maya had always been empathetic, but now she was developing a deeper understanding of the hidden stories that surround us every day. She started volunteering with a local veterans organization, helping with job placement programs for military members transitioning to civilian careers. I figured if my sister could command an aircraft carrier, I could at least help veterans update their resumes, she said with characteristic humor. The changes at Enchanted Elegance were equally significant. Christine had apparently used our experience as a teaching moment for her entire staff, implementing new training programs focused on customer service, unconscious bias, and the importance of treating every client with equal respect, regardless of their appearance or assumed financial status. Victoria, in particular, had undergone what seemed like a complete professional transformation. About a month after our visit, she reached out to Maya directly to apologize again and to ask if she could share our story with permission as part of the boutique's new staff training program. I keep thinking about how wrong I was, not just about your family situation, but about my whole approach to customer service. I was making assumptions and judgments that had nothing to do with helping brides find their perfect dress and everything to do with my own prejudices and insecurities. Maya, ever gracious, had agreed to let Victoria share appropriate parts of our experience, hoping it might prevent other families from going through the same initial dismissal and disrespect we encountered. Christine had also instituted what she called the Every Bride Matters policy, ensuring that all customers received access to the full range of dresses and services regardless of their stated budget or initial appearance. They had partnered with several military support organizations to offer the family discount program to a wider range of service members and veterans, making their beautiful gowns accessible to people who might not otherwise be able to afford them. "Your sister changed how we do business," Christine told me when she called to update me on these developments. But more than that, she changed how we think about who we serve and why we do this work. As Maya's wedding day approached, the dress from Enchanted Elegance became a symbol of much more than just bridal fashion. It represented the importance of perseverance, the value of standing up for yourself and others, and the power of treating people with dignity regardless of their background or perceived circumstances. Maya had the dress altered by a seamstress recommended by Christine, a woman named Rosa who had worked with many military families over the years. Rosa understood the significance of the gown and the story behind it, treating each fitting appointment like a sacred ritual. "This dress has good energy now," Rosa told Maya during the final fitting. "It carries the love of a sister who would do anything to protect you, and the wisdom of people who learned important lessons. You're gonna feel that when you wear it." Maya laughed at Rosa's mystical interpretation, but I could see that she understood what the older woman meant. The dress had become more than just a beautiful gown. It was a reminder of our family's strength, my hidden history, and the importance of fighting for respect and dignity. The week before the wedding, I received an unexpected visitor at my home. Christine Martinez stood on my front porch, holding a small wrapped package and wearing an expression of nervous determination. "Admiral Foster, I hope you don't mind me coming unannounced. I have something I wanted to give you before Maya's wedding." I invited her in, curious about what could have prompted this personal visit. Christine sat on my couch and carefully unwrapped the package, revealing a small crystal frame containing a photograph I'd never seen before.
"This was taken at the boutique the day you and Maya came in," she explained. "One of our staff photographers captured it during Maya's appointment when she was looking at herself in the mirror wearing the Elena Vasquez gown. I thought you might like to have it." The photograph was beautiful. Maya was radiant in her wedding dress, her face glowing with joy and confidence. But what struck me most was the expression on my own face as I stood beside her, adjusting the dress's train. There was love there, and pride, and a protective tenderness that I rarely allowed myself to feel, much less show. "Thank you," I said softly, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "This means more than you know." Christine smiled. "I also wanted to tell you that we've had several military families come to us since word spread about our policies. Each time I think about you and Maya and how differently that day could have gone if we'd approached it with respect and openness from the beginning." She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "I served 8 years in the Navy, as I mentioned, but I never reached the level of command you did. I never had the responsibility for thousands of lives or the weight of making decisions that could affect entire operations. But I understand enough about military service to know that what you accomplished was extraordinary, and the way you've transitioned to civilian life with such grace and humility is equally remarkable." I appreciated her words, though they made me slightly uncomfortable. I just tried to do my job well and then move on to the next phase of my life. Nothing more complicated than that. Christine shook her head. "Admiral, with respect, that's exactly what makes you remarkable. You have every right to expect recognition and special treatment based on your service record, but instead you choose to live quietly and let your actions speak for themselves. That kind of character is rare." After Christine left, I spent a long time looking at the photograph she'd given me. The image captured a moment of pure happiness and connection between Maya and me, unmarred by the conflict that had preceded it or the revelations that had followed it. In that moment, we were simply two sisters, sharing a magical experience, which was exactly what I had hoped for when I'd agreed to go dress shopping with her. Maya's wedding day dawned perfect and clear, with the kind of golden autumn light that makes everything look like it's been touched by magic. I arrived at the church early to help with final preparations, carrying the carefully preserved wedding dress in its protective garment bag. Maya was already there, surrounded by her bridesmaids and getting her hair and makeup done in the church's bridal preparation room. When she saw me, her face lit up with excitement and nervous energy. "Becca! Thank goodness you're here! I think I'm going to throw up from nerves, but I'm also so excited I can barely contain myself." I hugged her carefully, mindful of her half-finished makeup. "You're going to be absolutely perfect. David is going to forget how to breathe when he sees you." The bridesmaids, all college friends of Maya's, who had heard various versions of our boutique story, treated me with a mixture of curiosity and respect. They'd known Maya's sister was former military, but the details of my rank and service had apparently grown in the telling. "Is it true you commanded like 5,000 people?" asked her maid of honor, Jessica, as I helped Maya into her dress. "More or less," I replied, focusing on the intricate buttons that ran down the back of the gown. "But today, I'm just the sister of the bride, which is a much more important job." Maya laughed, some of her nervousness dissolving. "See, that's exactly what I mean about you. You commanded aircraft carriers, but you act like helping me with my dress buttons is the more significant responsibility." As I fastened the last button and adjusted the dress's flowing train, I was struck by how perfectly the gown fit Maya's personality and style. The Elena Vasquez design was elegant, but not ostentatious. Classic, but with modern touches. Sophisticated, but still romantic. It was exactly what she'd been dreaming of, and seeing her in it now on her actual wedding day made all the drama at the boutique seem worth it. "How do I look?" Maya asked, turning to face the full-length mirror that had been brought into the preparation room. "Like the most beautiful bride in the world," I said honestly. "Like someone who deserves every bit of happiness that's coming her way." The ceremony was perfect. Maya floated down the aisle like she was walking on air, her dress trailing behind her in elegant waves. David's expression when he saw her was everything I had hoped for, a mixture of awe and love and complete devotion that made it clear he understood exactly how lucky he was. During the ceremony, as I watched my sister exchange vows with the man she loved, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. The experience at Enchanted Elegance had been difficult and frustrating, but it had also forced important conversations and revelations that might not have happened otherwise. Maya now knew who I really was, not just the sanitized version I'd been presenting for the past 3 years. She understood the complexity of my background and the reasons for my sometimes guarded nature. More importantly, she'd learned that everyone around us carries hidden stories and experiences that deserve respect and consideration. The reception was a joyful celebration, filled with dancing, laughter, and the kind of heartfelt toasts that bring tears to everyone's eyes. When it came time for my maid of honor speech, I kept it focused on Maya and her happiness, but I couldn't help including a reference to our shared adventure. "Maya has always been the dreamer in our family," I said, raising my champagne glass to the gathered guests. "She believes in fairy tales and happy endings, and she never lets practical concerns diminish her hopes for magical moments. A few months ago, when we went shopping for her wedding dress, I got to see that optimism and determination in action. Even when things seemed difficult, even when others tried to limit her options or dampen her enthusiasm, Maya never stopped believing that she would find exactly what she was looking for. And she did. Not just the perfect dress, but the perfect partner, the perfect day, and the perfect start to what I know will be a perfect marriage. Maya teaches all of us that it's worth holding out for our dreams, worth standing up for what we deserve, and worth believing that magical moments are possible if we're brave enough to pursue them. The crowd applauded warmly, and Maya blew me a kiss from the head table, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. Later in the evening, as the reception began winding down, David approached me with a serious expression. "Rebecca, I wanted to thank you for everything you've done for Maya, not just today, but throughout her life. She told me about what happened at the bridal shop and about learning the truth about your military service. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I want you to know that I understand what an honor it is to be marrying into a family with someone like you in it. Maya is lucky to have you as a sister, and I'm lucky to have you as a sister-in-law. I was touched by his sincerity. David, you make Maya happy, which makes you pretty important to me. Take care of her. Always, he promised. As the evening came to an end and Maya prepared to leave for her honeymoon, she pulled me aside for a private moment. Still wearing her beautiful wedding dress, she looked radiant and content, like someone whose deepest dreams had all come true.
"Thank you," she said simply, "for today, for the dress, for finally trusting me enough to tell me who you really are. This was the most perfect day of my life, and it wouldn't have been possible without you." I hugged her tightly, careful not to wrinkle the Elena Vasquez gown. "You deserved every bit of perfection, Maya. You deserved respect from the beginning, you deserved access to the most beautiful dresses, and you deserved to feel like the most important person in the world today." "I did feel like that," she said softly, "but not just because of the dress or the ceremony. Because I finally got to see my sister for who she really is, and I got to be proud of everything she's accomplished." In the months that followed Maya's wedding, the changes that had begun with our experience at Enchanted Elegance continued to ripple outward. The boutique became known throughout the military community as a place where service members and their families were welcomed and respected. Christine regularly spoke at veteran support meetings about the importance of recognizing and honoring military service in all its forms. Victoria had become one of the boutique's most requested consultants, particularly for military families. Her transformation from judgmental to genuinely empathetic had made her especially effective at connecting with brides who might be feeling overwhelmed or out of place in high-end retail environments. "That experience with you and Maya changed how I see everyone," Victoria told me during a chance encounter at a coffee shop several months after the wedding. "I realized I was making assumptions based on surface impressions instead of taking the time to really listen to people and understand their stories." Maya's volunteer work with veteran support organizations had expanded into a part-time coordinator position, helping military families navigate everything from job searches to housing assistance to accessing benefits they'd earned through service. Her experience with me had opened her eyes to the challenges veterans face, and she'd found a way to turn that awareness into meaningful action. "I feel like I finally understand what it means to serve," she told me one day as we were having lunch together. "Not in the military way that you did, but in the way of using whatever skills and resources you have to help people who need it." The story of our experience at Enchanted Elegance had become something of a legend in veteran circles, shared not as a tale of conflict or confrontation, but as an example of how understanding and respect could transform difficult situations into positive outcomes. It reminded people that veterans and active service members exist at every level of society, often choosing to blend in rather than stand out, and that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their appearance or assumptions about their circumstances. For me, the biggest change was learning to be more open about my background and more accepting of the respect that people wanted to show for my service. I'd spent 3 years trying to disappear into civilian anonymity, but Maya's pride in my accomplishments and the positive response from the community had helped me understand that there was value in letting people know that military service takes many forms and comes from many different kinds of people. I began occasionally speaking at veteran events and mentoring younger service members who were preparing for civilian careers, not as Admiral Foster, but as Rebecca, someone who had successfully navigated the transition from military command to civilian life while maintaining the values and principles that military service had instilled. The Elena Vasquez wedding dress now hangs in Maya's closet, carefully preserved and occasionally brought out for special occasions or when she wants to remember the perfect day when all her dreams came true. But for both of us, the dress represents much more than bridal fashion or wedding day memories. It's a reminder that everyone deserves respect and dignity,
that assumptions based on appearance or perceived status are often wrong and always unfair, and that standing up for yourself and others can lead to positive changes that extend far beyond the immediate situation. It's a symbol of the importance of family, of honest communication, and of being proud of who you are and what you've accomplished. It represents the value of perseverance, the power of quiet dignity, and the beautiful things that can happen when people choose to treat each other with kindness and respect. Most importantly, it's a testament to the fact that everyone has a story worth knowing, experiences worth respecting, and contributions worth acknowledging. Whether someone is a retired admiral or a young bride-to-be, a boutique manager learning important lessons, or a sales associate discovering the power of empathy, we all deserve to be seen, heard, and treated with the dignity that comes from recognizing our shared humanity. Maya's wedding dress will always remind us that magical moments are possible when we're brave enough to stand up for what's right, patient enough to help others learn and grow, and wise enough to understand that respect isn't something that can be earned through titles or uniforms, but something that should be given freely to everyone we meet. Because in the end, that's what service really means. Not just the formal kind that happens in military uniforms, but the everyday kind that happens when we choose to treat each other with kindness, dignity, and respect. When we recognize that everyone around us has fought battles we know nothing about, achieved things we might never understand, and deserves our consideration and compassion regardless of how they look or what we assume about their circumstances. That's a lesson worth remembering, worth sharing, and worth living by every single day. 2 years after Maya's wedding, I found myself standing in front of Enchanted Elegance once again, but this time the circumstances were entirely different. I wasn't there as a customer or even as someone seeking resolution to past grievances. I was there because Christine had invited me to speak at a special event she was hosting for military families in the community. The boutique had been transformed for the evening into something that looked more like an elegant reception venue than a bridal shop. The harsh fluorescent lighting had been replaced with warm, ambient illumination that made the displayed gowns look like they were floating in pools of golden light. Tables had been set up throughout the space, decorated with simple but elegant centerpieces that somehow managed to make the commercial space feel intimate and welcoming. As I walked through the doors that had once felt so unwelcoming, I was struck by how different everything felt. The same physical space that had initially radiated exclusivity and judgment now emanated warmth and inclusivity. The staff members who greeted arriving guests did so with genuine enthusiasm, making each person feel welcomed and valued, regardless of their appearance or background. Victoria spotted me almost immediately and approached with a smile that seemed to light up her entire face. The transformation in her demeanor was remarkable. Where there had once been calculating assessment and barely concealed condescension, now there was authentic warmth and professional confidence tempered with humility. "Admiral Foster, I'm so glad you could make it tonight," she said, extending her hand with genuine pleasure. "Christine has been looking forward to this event for months, and having you here makes it even special." I shook her hand, noting the firm confidence of her grip and the directness of her eye contact. This was not the same woman who had dismissed Maya and me 2 years earlier. "Thank you for having me, Victoria. I have to say the place looks absolutely beautiful tonight." We wanted to create an atmosphere that reflected what we've learned about hospitality and respect, Victoria explained as she led me toward the main gathering area. Every detail was planned with the idea that every person who walks through our doors deserves to feel special and valued. The event itself was a celebration of military families in the community, but it was also clearly a demonstration of how significantly Enchanted Elegance had evolved since our difficult experience. Military couples who were planning weddings mingled with veteran families, active duty personnel, and community supporters, all brought together by Christine's vision of creating a more inclusive and understanding business environment. Christine herself appeared at my elbow as if summoned by some invisible signal. She looked radiant in a sophisticated navy blue dress that somehow managed to be both professional and celebratory. Her confidence evident in every gesture and expression. "Rebecca, thank you so much for coming. she said, embracing me with the familiarity of someone who had become not just a business acquaintance, but a genuine friend over the past 2 years. I know how busy you are with your consulting work, and it means everything to have you here tonight. I couldn't have missed this, I told Christine honestly. What you've built here, the changes you've implemented, it's exactly the kind of positive transformation that makes everything we went through worthwhile. As the evening progressed, I had the opportunity to meet several military families who had become regular customers of Enchanted Elegance. Each had their own story of how the boutique's new approach had made their wedding planning experience special and meaningful. A young Army sergeant told me about how Victoria had personally worked with her for hours to find a dress that fit both her budget and her dreams. A Navy wife described how the staff had accommodated her husband's deployment schedule, holding her dress and adjusting the timeline to ensure everything was perfect for his brief leave period. But the story that affected me most came from an older woman named Eleanor, a Gold Star mother whose son had been killed in Afghanistan 3 years ago. She was there that night because her daughter was getting married, and she wanted to find a way to honor her son's memory as part of the wedding celebration. When I first came here 6 months ago, I was worried they wouldn't understand what I was trying to do. I wanted to find a way to include Michael in Sarah's wedding to make sure his sacrifice was remembered and honored, but I didn't know how to explain that to people who hadn't experienced military loss. She went on to describe how Christine and Victoria had not only understood her needs, but it helped her create a meaningful tribute that would be incorporated into her daughter's wedding ceremony.
We had a customer experience that forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about our assumptions, our biases, and our understanding of who we serve and why we do this work. She went on to describe the changes that had been implemented since then, the training programs that had been developed, and the partnerships that had been forged with military support organizations. But more than listing accomplishments, she talked about the fundamental shift in perspective that had occurred throughout her organization. We learned that excellent customer service isn't about treating people well because of what they can afford or what they look like or what we assume about their circumstances, Christine continued. It's about recognizing that every person who comes to us is trusting us with one of the most important days of their life. And that trust is a privilege that must be earned and honored regardless of any other factors. When Christine introduced me to speak, I felt the familiar mixture of honor and responsibility that had always accompanied public speaking engagements. But this felt different from military presentations or corporate consultations. This felt personal and meaningful in a way that connected directly to my hopes for how people should treat each other. I want to tell you about my sister Mayana, I began, looking out at the faces of military families and community members who had gathered to celebrate connection and understanding. 2 years ago, Mayana was planning her wedding and dreaming of finding the perfect dress for the most important day of her life. She was excited, hopeful, and trusting that the people she encountered would help her make those dreams come true. I described our initial experience at the boutique, the assumptions that had been made, and the way Mayana's excitement had been dampened by judgment and dismissal. But I also talked about what had happened next, the way understanding and respect had transformed a negative situation into something positive and meaningful. The story isn't really about military rank or recognition or special treatment, I explained to the attentive audience. It's about the basic human dignity that everyone deserves, regardless of their background or circumstances. It's about the importance of looking beyond surface impressions to see the whole person. And it's about how positive change is possible when people are willing to learn, grow, and do better. I went on to share what I had learned from the experience, not just about civilian interactions, but about the importance of being authentic about who I was and what I had accomplished. For too long, I had tried to hide from my military background, thinking that blending in was the best way to transition to civilian life. But Mayana's pride in my service and the respect I had encountered from the community had taught me that there was value in being open about my experiences. Military service teaches us about duty, honor, and commitment. But perhaps the most important lesson is about service itself, about using whatever skills and experiences we have to make the world a little better for the people around us. That service doesn't end when we take off the uniform. It continues in how we treat each other, how we stand up for what's right, and how we work to create communities where everyone is valued and respected. The response to my remarks was warm and heartfelt, but what meant the most to me were the individual conversations that followed. Military families thanked me for speaking openly about veteran experiences and the challenges of transitioning to civilian life. Civilians expressed gratitude for gaining a better understanding of military service and the sacrifices made by service members and their families. One conversation in particular stayed with me long after the evening ended. A young woman named Sarah, who was getting married in a few months, approached me with her fiancé, who was about to deploy overseas. "My fiancé is in the Army, and he's leaving for deployment next month," Sarah explained. "We're trying to plan a wedding for when he gets back, but everything feels so uncertain and stressful. After hearing your story tonight, I feel like I understand better that it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to expect to be treated with respect even when our situation is complicated." Her fiancé, a quiet young man who carried himself with the disciplined bearing I recognized from my own years of service, shook my hand firmly. "Thank you for your service, Admiral, and thank you for reminding all of us that respect isn't something you have to earn through rank or recognition. It's something that should be given freely." As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, I found myself reflecting on the remarkable transformation that had occurred, not just in the physical space of Enchanted Elegance, but in the hearts and minds of everyone who had been touched by our experience 2 years earlier. Mayana arrived near the end of the event, having finished her workday at the Veteran Support Organization, where she now served as a full-time program coordinator. Marriage had brought her a new level of confidence and purpose, and her work helping military families gave her a deep understanding of the challenges faced by service members and veterans. "How did it go tonight?" she asked, as she joined Christine, Victoria, and me in the quiet aftermath of the successful event. "It was perfect," Christine replied with evident satisfaction. "Everything we hoped it would be and more. Your sister's remarks were exactly what people needed to hear." Mayana smiled proudly. She has a gift for finding the right words to help people understand important things. It's one of the many reasons I'm proud to be her sister. Victoria, who had been quietly cleaning up decorations, paused in her work to join our conversation. "Admiral Foster, I want you to know that your story and your sister's grace in how she handled everything continues to influence how I approach every customer interaction. I think about you both regularly, and I'm grateful for the lesson you taught me about the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect." As we prepared to leave that evening, Christine walked Mayana and me to the door, just as she had done 2 years earlier under such different circumstances. But this time there was no tension or conflict, no misunderstandings or hurt feelings. There was only the warm satisfaction of seeing how much positive change was possible when people committed to doing better. "Thank you both," Christine said as we reached the entrance. "Not just for tonight, but for everything that led to tonight. For your patience when we needed to learn, for your grace when we needed forgiveness, and for your continued support as we've worked to become the kind of business we always should have been." Mayana hugged Christine warmly. "Thank you for showing that it's possible to turn difficult experiences into opportunities for growth and positive change. What you've built here is something really special." As Mayana and I walked to our cars in the parking lot, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. What had started as a simple sister outing to shop for a wedding dress had evolved into something much more significant, a lesson about respect, dignity, understanding, and the power of positive change. "You know what I love most about tonight?" Mayana said as we reached our vehicles. "It wasn't about you being a retired admiral or me being the bride who was treated poorly. It was about all of us being part of a community that values respect and understanding and service to others." She was right. The evening had been about connection and shared values, about the importance of treating everyone with dignity, and about the beautiful things that happen when people commit to being better than they were before. The story of our experience at Enchanted Elegance had become something larger than a single incident of poor customer service followed by recognition and respect. It had become a reminder that everyone we meet has a story worth knowing, experiences worth respecting, and contributions worth acknowledging. It had shown that positive change is possible when people are willing to learn, grow, and do better. Most importantly, it had demonstrated that service to others takes many forms, from commanding naval vessels to helping brides find their perfect dress, from coordinating veteran support programs to simply treating every person we encounter with the dignity and respect they deserve as fellow human beings. Mayanna's wedding dress still hangs in her closet, carefully preserved and occasionally brought out for special occasions. But the real legacy of our experience isn't found in silk and lace and intricate beadwork. It's found in the changed lives, the increased understanding, the commitment to treating others better, and the recognition that we all have the power to make the world a little more respectful, a little more inclusive, and a little more kind. Because in the end, that's what true service looks like. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments, but the daily choice to see the dignity in every person we meet, to stand up for what's right when it matters, and to use whatever influence we have to make the world a little better for everyone. That's a lesson worth remembering, sharing, and living by every single day. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.